listeners, welcome back to Grief Out Loud. I'm your host, Janet Cristofaro. Sometimes grief closes us off, and sometimes it cracks us wide open. For Danielle LaRock, when her dad died of a heart attack when she was just 19, the grief led her to be a little distant with people, to not let them all the way in. A few years later, she reconnected with Ian, the younger brother of a childhood friend. After just one meetup, they knew they were it for one another. It was a love that got right in there and opened up the places she had closed off in grieving for her father. Then, just a few years later, in 2022, Ian died suddenly, breaking Danielle's heart in new and devastating ways. This grief was different, though, because the way Ian loved Danielle transformed and opened her heart. After he died, it remained open, as a way to stay connected to him and to that love. This openness stayed with her, even as she faced the death of her beloved dog Blue just 2 years later. You might be wondering, how is Danielle still standing in this world, having lost 3 great loves in such a short period of time? There were likely times when Danielle wondered that herself. And yet she's here, keeping her heart open to her dad, to Ian, to Blue, and to the people she's connected with who are also grieving. In this conversation, Danielle shares not only the heartbreak of these losses, but also the profound ways they've reshaped her life, opening her up to love, to connection, and to being more fully present. In the end, this is a conversation about love, the kind that doesn't fade, even when someone dies. Danielle is also a podcaster and co-host of National Park After Dark, a show about the eerie and untold stories of nature's most beautiful places. Okay, here's our conversation. Danielle, welcome to Grief Out Loud.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm really looking forward to our time together. And listeners, not just because Danielle and I discovered we're both from New England, and it's such a rare gift to talk to someone who's from that part of the country.
It's a bond, unlike no other. Yeah.
Well, and thank you, since you're from New Hampshire, for agreeing that Connecticut counts as New England, because some folks from New Hampshire, Vermont are like, well...
You know, I was born there, but I still do feel a little weird about it.
About Connecticut,
so, yeah.
The Flatlanders, I've been told we're called. So, Danielle, what feels important for us to know about your dad, who died when you were 19?
Oh, what is important to know? He was so funny. He was the funniest, most charismatic person. And he has totally just like set the bar so high in so many ways for me when I look to, not just like potential partners or anything and how he treated me, but just like who I want to be around. I need you to have a sense of humor and quick wit and to take things not so seriously, and some light bullying is always fun. And he was such a good guy, and he didn't have a lot, but he made the most of it.
Well, I'm going to take that as another win for Connecticut, since you also just shared that your dad grew up in Connecticut.
Yeah, his whole family is in Connecticut. Like, everybody is in Connecticut. Yep.
Yeah, I so relate to that idea of, if you're being really nice to me, I feel like I don't think you like me very much. But if you're giving me a hard time and being kind of sarcastic with me, then I know we're good. So
yeah, I don't trust you if you're very nice all the time. So.
And how about your partner, Ian, who died just over 3 years ago now?
Yeah. Ian was the kindest person I have ever met. And again, at surface level, he gave people a lot of crap, but it was always in a playful way. He didn't have a bone in his body that had any ill will towards anyone. And he was always so genuine in wanting to know people and their stories, what made them who they were. He was just such a light, such a rarity to find, not only in a romantic partner, but in just a person in general, just so genuine.
How did the two of you meet?
So we actually technically met when we were kids. So his sister, Courtney, his older sister, was one of my first friends in school. We were in the same graduating class. We met in sixth grade, and Ian was 4 years younger. So I technically met Ian when he was a child. I always just kind of looked at him like my friend's little brother. There was nothing really other than that. And we kind of, we grew up in the same hometown and we had a lot of similar friends, but it wasn't until after I graduated college that we actually connected in a meaningful way, in 2018 or 19. So yeah, we were kind of on parallel paths for most of our life, but not towards, the last 5 or 6 years of his life did we really know each other.
How would you describe your relationship?
Oh, so instant best friends. It kind of was one of those silly cliche things of when you know, you know. And we both knew immediately. So, like I said, we had known of each other for years, but he definitely, when he reached out to me to ask me on a date, and I said, yeah, sure, didn't really think much of it. When we left that bar, that meeting, I was about to get on a plane to go somewhere. So it was kind of like, let's just sneak this in real quick. We'll meet up. Hi, hey, okay. And then go on my way. The second we left, we instantly messaged each other and we're like, so this is it, right? Like we're together now, which is so backwards, not really the thing that you do nowadays, the whole playing hard to get or not so interested, but maybe. And there was none of that from the very beginning. And we were just so honest about our feelings for one another right away that we were just instantly connected, and that translated for the rest of time. And it was something that I have never experienced before and would be very blessed to experience again. But wow, yeah, just like our relationship right off the bat was instantly special and unique.
I know we're going to come back to Ian and talk so much more about him and about your grief, but I wanted to invite space for one other loss that you have experienced recently, your dog Blue, who it was just the year anniversary just a few days ago that he died. And what do you want to share about him?
Blue was the happiest dog I've ever encountered. And that's saying a lot because I was a veterinary technician for almost a decade. So I've met a lot of dogs. And I have another dog that I love and cherish so much, but he is nothing like Blue. Blue was everybody's instant best friend. He was a true dog's dog. He was so just stoked on life. There's no other way to put it. His tail was wagging through everything, through every porcupine quilling. He ate rat poison once. He's had a lot of near misses before he actually exited this world. Every single time, no matter what, he was just such a joy, and he's taught me a lot.
And both of those dogs, Blue and what's your other dog's name?
Chaska.
Chaska. They were part of your family with Ian.
Yes. So I've had Chaska and I got Blue before I met Ian. So they were kind of they are my dogs, but they never have connected with anyone like Ian or spent time with anyone like our family did, the family we built together. So they are definitely, Ian was their dad for sure. Yeah.
And as it goes, sometimes is one of them more like you and one of them more like Ian?
Yes, 100%. Chaska is me through and through, and Blue was Ian. Yeah. Yeah.
So just sitting with that, you lose Ian, and then the dog that you lose is kind of a reflection of Ian's personality as well.
Yeah. So that was a huge hit. And, that's the first thing that comes to mind is, when I lost Blue, it was like losing more of Ian. It was its own loss, but in another way, it was an additional loss of Ian, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So interconnected and interwoven and so many memories shared together. And
yeah.
I'm curious, Danielle, I know you have talked publicly about your grief before and other settings and platforms. What is it like in this moment to have just introduced us to these three very important people and beings in your life?
It feels like a relief because I don't get to talk about them as much as I want. You know, they're always on my mind. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of them either in passing or have, full on moments of either joy or sadness or whatever is coming with, the day. But I so rarely get to speak about them in long form, other than just in a passing moment and I do talk a lot about grief and losing them here and there on my podcast, but my podcast doesn't have to do with them. It's like those things. Yes, my dad died before I began the podcast, but it wasn't anything. It's a totally different subject. So from time to time they come up, but to share more intimately and in depth about who they were in this life and what they've meant to me and how they, influenced me and changed me, like that, this is my favorite thing to talk about because they're my favorite things.
What did 19-year-old Danielle know about grief when your dad died?
Ooh, I would say little to nothing. Yeah. Prior to my dad's passing, I had lost a couple of grandparents, his parents, but we weren't close. My parents divorced when I was two, or at least were separated. I did not grow up in a family that was very close, especially with my dad's side, just seeing them briefly. And so losing them was, of course, sad, but I think I was more sad for my dad and not me. So I had that kind of experience, but it wasn't much. And I had one pet pass away, my first ever family dog. Her name was Spot. And that was kind of a tragic passing, actually. That was my first real introduction to not only what grief is, but what death looks like. That was the first death I witnessed. So that was that was the worst thing that had ever happened to me up until that point. So I knew what sadness could feel like and look like when it touches your life. But of course, a pet is a different loss than a parent. And so when my dad passed away, I was pretty unprepared for what that meant. Not only the sadness and the grief that comes with it, but just the life altering, just how much my life was now changed and would forever be changed.
What did you do with your grief as a 19-year-old?
Nothing. Ignored it in a pretty unhealthy way. He passed away 2 days before the start of my sophomore year of college. So I was in probably the worst setting to deal with that. Not only because I didn't have a great support system. I had quote unquote friends, but they were, people I would party friends or friends that I had just met or was just associated with because I lived in the same building as them. I didn't have a lot of community support. I had nobody that could relate to what I had just experienced. All the people around me were, teenagers or in their early 20s that still had their parents, at least that I was aware of. And I did a lot of coping through drinking. I wasn't an alcoholic or anything, but I certainly drank a lot. And it was a way to kind of mask feeling or thinking about him or the sadness that I felt. And, if I wasn't studying or in class, I didn't want to leave any time for sitting with what I had just went through. So I filled that time with things that were distractions. So I actually didn't really deal with that until much later, many years later. Yeah.
Seems like such a common story for so many people, but particularly I'm thinking about that setting that you were in at 19, having that sense like no one around me has ever had a parent die. Probably somebody had, but nobody else was talking about it.
Right.
And to feel so alone in it and not know what to do with it. And like, well, I can stay busy and I can stay distracted as much as
Mhm.
possible.
Yeah.
When would you say you started to connect more with that grief?
Well, I think that, to be honest, when I met Ian, Ian had a similar, not a similar story, but a shared experience. He lost his dad when he was a young adult to cancer. It wasn't a sudden passing like my dad, who died of a heart attack, but he got it. You know, he understood. He had a different relationship with his dad than I had with mine, but that was kind of irrelevant at the time for me. It was just kind of like, wow, this person that I love so much understands, to the point that, he would not bring it up if I didn't want to talk about it, but he acknowledged in a way that no one else really did. My mom would, on his birthday or his, anniversary of his passing, she would send me a text or a nice note or something to know that, to show me that I wasn't alone, because I'm my dad's only child and I'm not connected with his family. So it felt very isolating. Like I was the keeper of my father, even though I know that's not true. He has brothers and sisters and things that remember and love him. But to me, in my world, like I have no one to turn to talk to him. I mean, my mom had been divorced, for decades from him. But so when I met Ian and, we connected over that empty hole of like, I don't have my dad anymore, it was so comforting. And I remember April 24th is my dad's birthday. And on April 24th, every year, Ian would get me yellow roses, because yellow roses was a story that connects me to my dad. Um, and he would just, no other thing, just here are some yellow roses and I'm thinking of you. And that's all that it took to make me feel way less alone.
It seems like something that would have really added to the resonance that you both felt to have that shared experience of a dad dying, and a sense to be able to bring your dad back into your day to day by being able to
Mhm.
share about him with Ian, in a sense that you hadn't had an opportunity to do that very often after your dad died.
Yeah. And just knowing that, like, part of it was it just killed me because I know that my dad and Ian would have been the best of friends. My dad, even though I said he was so kind and he was, da da da, he also was particular, especially when it came to me. I was the typical like daddy's little girl, like no one's good enough for my daughter type of thing. And while I didn't have a ton of experience with like dating, I mean, I was 19 when he died. Like I didn't have much time to date and go through all that experience with him, but I just know he would have been super particular. And I know that he and Ian just he would have approved of Ian, and not just approved of him, but loved him. So to know that like I missed out on that, just getting to introduce someone you love and respect and admire to the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with and also love so much, like I missed that. And that really upset me and still does. But just to know that like when Ian did those things and we had those conversations about my dad, that he is somewhere approving of that, like that was enough for me.
Yeah. That there was some sort of dad thumbs up happening
Yeah, for sure.
somewhere. Yeah. I appreciate that though, Danielle, of talking about when someone dies, we miss what we had with them. But then there's always the missing of all the things they don't get to experience and we don't get to witness them experience moving forward in our lives too. There's so many layers to that.
Hmm.
I wanted to go back to Ian, and I feel like we could spend the whole rest of the conversation just talking about how amazing your love story was. But in recognition of that relief you mentioned, like you don't often get to tell the story of Ian, is there anything that you want to tell us about his death and how he died?
Yeah. So I've shared this, I think, once before publicly, or I don't know. It's hard to keep track. But Ian, all the deaths that I've had in my life that have been significant to me have been sudden and unexpected, and Ian's was not different. We were living in Washington together at the time, and for about a week prior to his passing, he was experiencing some headaches. Nothing crazy, but enough to mention to me, which should have been a big indicator right away because he was not one to complain or make things about him. But they started ramping up in severity about 3 days before his passing to the point that we went to urgent care. They dismissed him, gave him just some meds. He was a 28-year-old young, healthy guy, no pre-existing conditions to be concerned of. So he was sent home with some prescription headache medication. And then 2 days later, it was to the point it was debilitating. He was starting to get physically sick. I was talking to his mom, and his mom was the one who said, you guys really need to go to the ER. So we did. He checked himself in, and I accompanied him. I was sitting next to him while they gave him some IV fluids and more headache medication and things like that. And I remember when he was discharged, it was just around midnight. And they said to me, this is what we did for him. He's going to be really groggy because we gave him Benadryl. So don't you need to drive him home, and he might be a little out of it. And so I said, okay, I drove him home, and he was really out of it. I've taken Benadryl before. I know it makes you a little sleepy, but not anything like this. But I thought, this is just kind of the result of a week of just feeling like crap. And he just really needed some rest. So we went into our bedroom, and right before he laid down, he said, "Thank you, babe, for taking me." And I said, "Of course, yeah. Good night. I'll see you in the morning." And then 5 hours later, we woke up, or I woke up to him post-ictal. So I am not a human in human medicine, but as a veterinary technician and working in a hospital for so many years, I've seen a lot, and I can recognize the signs of someone either entering or coming out of a seizure. That is what I was seeing with him. He was still talking, but he wasn't making sense. He was answering me, but his answers didn't match my question. So I immediately called 911. And I started recording him because, again, it's helpful to show medical professionals what you're seeing instead of just trying to describe it to them. So I was recording him, asking him questions and things like that after I had called 911. They were there within 10 minutes. They were asking him different questions, what's your name? Where are you? Things like that. And he was answering them accurately. But then he would say, "Who are you? What's happening?" And they were very clearly EMTs, so there was still disconnect going on. Long story short, they ended up taking him to the hospital. I got there. I drove separately. There was no indication of an emergency. Let's just say that. They drove him to the hospital, but it wasn't sirens blaring, move out of the way type of thing. I get to the hospital. He is in a room by himself. He has monitoring equipment on, but there's nobody attending to him. And they're just kind of letting him hang out. It's around 7 a.m. at this point in time. And I'm sitting next to him again, because I have experience. I was looking at his monitoring equipment, what his readings were, everything from his blood oxygen levels to his blood pressure, etc. Suddenly, he started becoming very agitated, trying to rip things off of him. His blood oxygen was plummeting, and he was starting to have another seizure. I alerted the nurse station, asked for help, and immediately everyone swarmed in and literally pushed me into a corner because there were so many people around him suddenly. They intubated him because he was no longer breathing on his own. And they rushed him to emergency brain surgery, because his brain was swelling. That is all the information I had at the time. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know if he was having a reaction to medication that he had received. I had no idea what was happening, but I did know that I needed to call his family. So while he was in emergency surgery, I called his sister and his mom and told them what happened and that they needed to come right away. So he gets out of emergency surgery where they had to drill a hole into his skull to relieve the pressure of the swelling. But again, they also had no idea what was happening. They're like, we know his brain is swelling, but we don't know why. So this is all we can do right now and just kind of wait. So he was in the ICU several hours later, and his family was, it's states away. So they're catching flights. It's a long process. So several hours later, the neurologist came in after he had undergone a CAT scan. He shut the door behind him and he told me, with 100% certainty, I can tell you, Ian will never recover from this. I kind of knew that was coming. Just I had this feeling as soon as I got to the hospital that day that this isn't right. But, hearing that is hearing that confirmation is just, how can you prepare for something like that when 24 hours before he was okay? I had to sit with not only that I just literally watched the love of my life die in front of me, but also that I was the only person that loved and knew Ian, the only person in the world that knew he was gone. And how in the world am I supposed to tell his family and his friends that he died? So that was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, and right up there with processing that I just witnessed the death. So yeah, that was something that I think I leave out a lot when I talk about Ian's death is people know he died and it's sad and it's awful. But there's also going back to what you said, the layers of grief and stuff. Like there's also this trauma that I've experienced that also needs tending to. Seeing it happen and being there and kind of having this, I was the only person there. Should I have done something differently? Could I have helped? There's so many things that I deal with all the time. It's only been 3 years, that's a blink of an eye. It's something that I still need help processing and mulling over, even though I've come to, the conclusion after talking to every doctor that was involved and different specialists and that I couldn't have done anything, that it would have been, he was going to die no matter what type of thing. And the cause of his death wasn't revealed until his autopsy. So I'm getting off track, but essentially the way in which Ian died was just as shocking as that he did die.
And that isolation, again, the theme of isolation that you felt being the only one who had that information, and then the responsibility to share with his family and his friends to deliver that news to them. I think that's something we don't often think about. There's like the impact to us, but then having to break other people's hearts in the way that our hearts have been broken.
Yep.
I'm curious, Danielle, you share the story and it's a lot of the information. And like, what was your process of connecting to the emotion, your own physical reaction to that? Because it's just in the moment, you're just like trying to keep up with what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I learned a lot about myself in those days and weeks following. I always knew I could handle things well, compartmentalizing.
Mm-hmm. Shove it in a box.
Yes. And a lot of that happened to just because of the nature of my work, with at the animal hospital and I worked in surgery. I saw a lot of things that you can't be emotional when there's a job to do and a life to save or someone to make better. There was that helped, but also the other part of it was again, because I was the only person there to see the lead up, the actual occurrence and the direct aftermath, I felt a huge responsibility of being Ian's advocate in a way that what happened, I need all the information. It's not only for my own self, but to pass that along to others. I wanted to be involved in every decision. And I know not everyone is like that. Some people are like, I can't even handle this. I need to delegate this out. I can't emotionally withstand the gravity of all of this, but I was the opposite. I needed to know everything. I wanted my hands in everything. And I wanted that not only for myself, but as a way of honoring and respecting Ian and making sure I knew everything so I could make the best informed decisions for him. That came with the price of keeping the mind busy, and doing different tasks from organ donation to finding out what happened in the surgical notes of what happened in that surgery, what medications he was given, what to do with his body, where are we doing, all these different things, like all of these tasks and to-dos and everything that comes when somebody dies, I was involved with as much as I could be because we weren't legally married. But thankfully, and I'm so full of gratitude every time I think of Lillian, who is Ian's mom. She looked at me as a daughter-in-law from the start and involved me in everything that I didn't have, legal standing with. But that really, it delayed the, oh my God, what just happened to me feelings, especially because we lived out of state and all these people came, not only to see Ian when, before they took him off life support and things like that, but I was hosting them in our home. And then after, my friends and family rotated weeks to come stay with me so I wouldn't be alone across the country. While that was so helpful and needed at the time, it gave me no time to really be by myself. So it wasn't for, I would say, a couple months until, of course, I cried and I was sad, but I don't think the true devastation of what just unfolded really hit me until a couple months later. And I would say that it was actually on July 7th of 2022 when his celebration of life occurred that I was like, that was the saddest day of my entire life, for sure.
Was that one of the last things on the long list of things you could be involved with and be busy with?
I think it was not only that, but it was just like this, his family for generations, his family back in the 1800s bought this island in a lake in Maine. It has been their shared vacation spot for their family since then. And it was his favorite place in the world. And that's when we decided to spread his ashes and also hold his celebration of life. I remember after I say ceremony very loosely, it wasn't anything super serious, but people shared things about him as just his closest friends and family. And I just remember after all of those services were done, we went out onto the boat, spread his ashes in the water, and it was the 4th of July weekend type of time frame. So it was like this, not just on the island, but in the surrounding areas, like it was this massive celebration. I just retreated to this small alcove on the island on this little dock. And as there's literal fireworks and people yelling and cheersing and having a great time, I just was the saddest I have ever been because everything just hit me. Not only having this in my face, everyone's having a great time, to feeling so alone and like, wow, that was really it. I'm in your favorite place in the world, a place I only know exists because of you, and you're not here, and you're not coming back. So that was just really it for me, like a smack in the face of I'm with his family, I'm with his friends, I'm in his paradise, and I'm alone.
How much it highlighted his absence and the finality of it really sinking in. I was just struck as you were talking, like back when your dad died and you were just going into your sophomore year of college, and like that dissonance of people being so focused and college party times, and then being in this situation of Ian's celebration of life being during a celebration of a holiday for the rest of the community. And just again, that dissonance of that, where I am is so different than everyone else around me.
And that's been such a common theme. And that's something I really struggled with after his death because I did feel so othered, not only because I was the only person. Well, I take that back. I wasn't the only person I knew that had lost a partner, but I just felt so alone, not only because of that, that fact, but also because I was at this time in my life, and I still kind of am, in this age where everyone I know is either getting engaged, getting married, having kids, or buying a house. And here I was, I just lost the person I thought I was going to do all of that with. I had to move out of the house that I shared with my person. We were planning on eloping to the point that when I was going through the house and going through our stuff, Courtney said to me, make sure you look it through all of his stuff because I would not be shocked if there was a ring hiding in there somewhere. Having to let go of all of those things for that I envisioned for myself, but also celebrate them when they were happening to the people I loved was so difficult. I mean, to the point so he passed in May. In February, I officiated his sister's wedding. Not just being a bystander of saying congrats or sending a card or something. Like I was just so woven into all of the people I love, being a bridesmaid or maid of honor or officiating a wedding or being in the delivery room when my best friend had a baby, like all of these things that are just huge, monumental milestones in your life that you do with someone else and this a great love that not that I really wanted that. Like, I didn't look at Ian. I was like, I can't wait to marry you and buy a house and have children. Like, that wasn't really our plan. Our plan was to just be together. But you can't help but be like, oh my God, now that's not my journey. At least that's not my journey with him. And that was a hard pill to swallow.
To have to let go of how you envisioned your life going with him, even if it wasn't like we're getting married and buying this house and having these kids, but he was going to be with you and celebrating all of your other friends and family hitting those milestones, and you would have been hitting
For
your
sure.
own
Like,
special
I could have
milestones.
totally envisioned us like going to these weddings and going to baby showers or first birthday celebrations and being like, oh, this is so great. And then getting in the car and being like, oh, not for us, but great. Like that, it's stuff like that, that you kind of,
Yeah.
you just grieve. You're sad.
You just went past the 3rd-year anniversary of Ian's death. And I'm curious, in those years, many people who have an experience of such a significant person in their life dying and their whole life plan sort of falling apart end up remaking themselves or revisioning what their life is going to be like. And what has come out of that for you?
I definitely am so changed, not just because I went through a traumatic event, but because I have such a different outlook on life and myself. And I think the biggest thing that I have reshaped is I prioritize love and not just romantic love. I'm talking love in general, love and appreciation and gratitude, not only for my life and what that looks like even if it's different from what I envisioned. But for my family, my friends, and I am just, everything is about love. It really is. And I think that it is so easy to lose sight of that. And I think that's part of the human experience is, just like having to balance that and prioritize that while the world is falling apart. Like that's hard to do. Life is hard. Bad things happen. Bad things are always happening. Relationships get strained. People betray you. You may betray others. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is loving everybody and showing up for them and being genuine. I didn't feel that way before. I wouldn't say I was cold before, but I was kind of detached. And now I am just so open and honest about my love for people. And I want to lead with that. And Ian's death, especially, but my dad's too, in its way, and even Blue's. I don't call up everyone I know every day and say how much I love them. I'm not like that. I think that's a little unrealistic, but I just want to make sure that the people that I care about know how much I love them. And that could be in words or actions or whatever. But it's just like my life was so full of love when I had Ian here physically that it's a feeling I just want to carry forever. And I can't have that anymore between us in that exact way. I mean, I still have a relationship with Ian in a different form that I'm so happy about and that I'll have forever. But I've had to accept that, I'm not going to become a nun, and just like never be with anybody again and whatever. Like that's something I've come to terms with. And it's just like I want to continue giving and receiving love for the rest of my life in the way that Ian introduced me to. And he's just changed me forever. And there are so many people that know me that didn't know Ian now, especially now. My life has grown and gone on, and I've met people who only know him through my stories. But I think it's really important to say that they kind of do know him because they know me. And I am so happy that he's shared with me different pieces that I've gotten to integrate into who I am and now how I show up for other people and how I interact with others in the world.
Yeah, there's so much more there, Danielle, than just sometimes we can think like, oh, you never know how precious life is until someone dies and you don't know how long people will be here. So you should love them as much as you can. But as I'm listening to you, it's not only the fact that Ian died that has changed you in this way. It's the fact that you got to be loved and love Ian that changed you.
Yeah. And I am just so grateful, not only for him, and it sounds awful. And of course, I would do anything, pay any price to have him back. But his death, I am also grateful for that I was there and got to be there, not only for him, but the way in which it has opened my eyes in a way that no other experience ever could have. And I'm just happy that he chose me not only to be in a relationship with and to give some of his love to, but to also walk him up to the door, of death and get to peek into what that means. And it was just so transformative.
I'm wondering, Danielle, were there tangible, practical things that you turned to support yourself with your grief and with the trauma of being there when Ian died?
You know, I don't know if this is like an answer to that. This is just what I did and what I found helpful. I have tried to go to therapy in the traditional way, but unpopular answer, it didn't really work for me. And I don't know if
Totally okay to
that's
say that here.
okay. I'm like, uh-oh.
I'm not a
Am I in
therapist.
trouble?
It's okay
Okay,
to say
okay,
it.
okay. It didn't super work for me, but what did help me in the initial aftermath was joining. I didn't do anything in person. Because I moved around a lot and things like that. But I joined a young widows support group online, and I had to go. I initially joined a widows group in general, and then very quickly realized that I need to narrow this down because a lot of the experiences that people are sharing are like started to ignite some anger in me of like my husband of 45 years just passed and my world is shattered. And that is so valid. And so I understand that. But newly grieving Danielle looked at that and said, oh, well, you got 45 years. I got 5. And I very quickly realized that's not healthy. So I narrowed it down to a group of women and men that lost their partners and spouses between their 20s and 30s. So that really helped me. I didn't participate much. I was kind of just a passive listener, reading people's experiences and just seeing similarities and that sense of community, even though I wasn't, holding hands with them or seeing them face to face or giving them a physical hug, just knowing they were out there and that they were writing the same things that I was experiencing and feeling was helpful. And then also to that, so we were in Washington, just kind of doing our own thing. And we had a lot of close friends in Colorado, which we had both lived in previously, and also, of course, in New England because we grew up in the same hometown. And so I faced this decision of, do I stay in Washington in our house? Do I move to Colorado? Do I move to New England? Or do I move somewhere else? And I decided that Colorado was the best decision because it was the place in which I was surrounded by the most people that knew and loved Ian that I could integrate into my day-to-day life. His sister was there, his best friends were there. I had lived there previously, so I had this sense of home. I just needed to be in places that Ian had been to. I would drive by his old apartment all the time. I would go to his old places of work. I would walk the same walkways he did. Like I had dinner with the people he had laughed with and had many meals together. I needed that like halfway house type of thing before I went on to the next destination. So being around people who knew him, like I needed that. To the thought of, especially that early on, going somewhere that he had never been, that we had no shared experiences, and that no one knew him or looked at me and knew and thought of him was a big no for me. I needed that like slow, I called it my halfway house. Like I needed it. So that was helpful. And then the third thing, which I've been very open about, is I had a spiritual awakening, like hard spiritual awakening. I was not religious. I mean, my mom went to church when I was a kid every Sunday. And I did up until I was a sophomore. And then there was like this ceremony that's like, you're now free to choose if you come back on your own or whatever. And I was like, I ain't coming back. Church, like in religion, wasn't a huge thing for me. But man, when Ian died, I dove straight in. And I had always been interested in spirituality and like what comes after this life. And that was a big thing me and my dad talked about all the time. I mean, growing up, like the afterlife and the purpose of this life and things like that were always on my mind, but never so poignantly as after Ian died. I was just searching for meaning. Where did he go? Is he still here? Is that it? What is this life all about? Like, what is the point of all of this? I was just clawing for any sort of understanding of what this is all about. And as a connection to him, like if I felt in my heart that he's still around, that helped me. It continues to help me. And so diving into different books, I mean, I have a whole bookshelf about everything from the quantum reality, like scientific, near death experiences and the afterlife and life between lives and things like that. And I just, for me, without getting too into it, leaning into spirituality and really honing in on people at a soul level. And that just helped me feel like this isn't the end. So it isn't as sad. It's something that helps me cope a lot. It's awful that I will not see Ian again for a long time. That sucks. But in my heart of hearts, I believe that I will see him. I'll see my dad. I'll see Blue. I'll see anybody else that goes before me again in some way. Do I think it's like heaven? No. I don't know what it is. I don't even really care to know. Like, I'm not that specific about it. I just, to know that we are all connected to the people that we form relationships with here and will always be connected to them, like that is kind of my life ring. That keeps me afloat on the days that I feel like I'm drowning.
One of the themes for me this past year has been really reckoning with this term meaning making that's everywhere in the grief world. And I'm always like, I don't know what that means. But listening to you share, Danielle, and to many of our other guests, I'm like, oh, I think I understand a little bit better now, this idea of like, how do I continue to find meaning in my place in this world and my connection with my person, even if they're not here in their physical form? How do I find meaning? So that's just what came to me as you were sharing.
Well, that has been a huge theme for me too. And I have always been a person of like, what does this mean? Like, what is the purpose of this and in anything? I'm inquisitive. I want to know. I feel like there should be a point to everything. After this, I found a lot of meaning through helping others. It's tough, to talk about this and to think about it in a way. But for me, there's a quote by Nora McInerney, who I absolutely adore and love, that, you are under no obligation to make lemonade out of lemons. Like, bad things happen to everyone. Tragedy touches everybody's life in one way or another, whether it's a physical death or not. You are under no obligation to turn that around into something positive. Awful things can just be awful. But for me, using what happened to me to help others is what it's all about. When I say that Ian's death was a gift and it's transformed my life, I mean it, because I have put out myself enough, not fully. I haven't shared everything about Ian and our relationship or how I'm processing his death, but I've done enough to serve as this like light in the darkness for others to find and talk to and to share their own experience with. And, I hosted a grief retreat last year that I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was like, I have the resources, I have the time, and this feels like I need to do this. So I just rented a place in Colorado. I got a therapist. I got some different activities together, and I was like, this is open to 16 people who have lost somebody and just want connection. I don't care when you lost them, who they were to you. If you're struggling, please come. And immediately I had 16 people come who had lost children, parents, partners, friends, grandparents, that were just like, this has been the biggest sigh of relief because, I'm not teaching them anything. I have nothing to teach. I'm just here as with open arms of it's okay to take a step out of day-to-day life and really get to sit with not only your emotions and process some of your grief, but to like remember them. Like I was like, please bring a photo of them, share your favorite memories of them, like tell us all about them and who they were to you, and just like a place for people to bring the dead back to life. Because I think, especially in our culture, you get this window, this sympathy window of it's okay to be sad and take some time. But as when that window shuts, it's quick and it's fast and it very rarely opens again. And I really was desperate to just fling it wide open and be like, this is just, it's a part of who you are now. And to just close that off and never talk about it again, or only on a couple days a year where people are like, oh yeah, sorry about that. I forgot that's 5 years ago. Ooh. Anyway, about that deadline, do you have it? It's just, it's not right. So I just wanted to make, whether I do it again or not, I would love to. I'm not going to make it my life's work or anything, but it's the most important thing I've ever done in my life is being available to people who feel like they either want to know about my experience, share theirs, or just have somebody to talk to. Like that's what it's all about.
Well, Danielle, I feel like this time we've spent together is definitely part of that, knowing that there's going to be so many listeners who are tuning in and hearing about your story and hearing about Ian and your dad and your dog Blue and getting to know them through you, and what an honor that is to do. I know we didn't talk about your podcast, National Parks After Dark, but I'm curious for listeners who are like, well, I want to stay connected to Danielle. Where would they connect with you? Tell us a little bit about your podcast if you want to.
Sure. Yeah. So, National Park After Dark is a podcast that I created with my friend Cassie. We've been doing it for 4 years now, or just over 4.5. Wow. Time flies. We talk about dark history and death and tragedy in outdoor spaces and public lands. It was formed out of a love for the outdoors. And yeah, you can find it anywhere you find podcasts. I have an episode dedicated to Ian when he passed, and we have a segment where we share listener stories. And over the last 3 years, a lot of them have transformed of sharing different people write in with their experiences of losing somebody and the signs they've received from them since then. And, that's just an extension of me being open on the show about talking about death and grief, and of course, Cassie too. So if you're interested in learning about that stuff and hearing about national park related stuff, National Park After Dark, you can find it anywhere. And the best way to connect with me directly is probably through my Instagram. I'm not on any other social thing very well. So that'll get lost into the abyss. But I believe my handle is D LaRock with a little underscore at the end.
And listeners, I always put that stuff in the show notes so you don't have to be scrambling for something to write that down. Yeah, Danielle, is such a gift to talk with you today. I know when I was preparing for the interview, I was like, I cannot listen to that podcast, National Park After Dark, or I'll never go camping again. But I'm glad it's out there for folks who are open to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just really feeling so changed by hearing your story and learning about your people and Blue. So thank you so much for spending this time today with me and with our listeners.
Well, thank you for inviting me to share about them because they're so important and I love them so much. And not everyone asks about Blue. When you asked or mentioned him, I was so happy and grateful for that because pet death is real, and pet grief is just as hard, just in a different way. So thank you for that.
Well, we might have a follow-up episode then, Danielle. I'll have you back to talk just about Blue and about pet death and all the things you experienced as a vet tech too, and witnessing other people's grief as well.
Yeah, I would love to.
Well, thanks again, Danielle. And listeners, I say this each and every time, but thank you for being part of our show, for making all the hours of editing mean something. I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at griefoutloud@dougie.org. That's our main website, dougy.org. It's where you'll find all the information about our local peer grief support group program, all of our free downloadable resources, including tip sheets, activity sheets, and of course, each and every episode of Grief Out Loud. Always excited to share that the podcast is sponsored in part by the Chester Stephan Endowment Fund. Grief Out Loud is a production of Dougie Center, the National Grief Center for Children and Families in Portland, Oregon. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you'll join us again next time.